Welcome back to the deep dive. It is February 2026. And if you look out the window, things might seem normal. But if you look at the data, and I mean, really look at the signals buried in these market intelligence reports, the venture capital logs, the obscure scientific journals, we are living through a moment that feels less like history and more like, I don't know, the first chapter of a science fiction novel.
It really does. I
Yeah.
mean, usually when we sit down to do one of these, we're focused. We might be looking at, the state of crypto or the future of EVs, one specific vertical. But today is different.
Today is very different because the source material itself is different. We have this massive stack on the table. We're looking at the latest market intelligence report from Manal Mehta, dated just this month. And what jumped out at me immediately wasn't just the depth, but just the sheer breadth of this thing.
Right. It's all over the map, but in a connected way.
Yeah.
We aren't just looking at stock tickers. We're trying to figure out why a pig farm in South Dakota, a tourist carrying a Louis Vuitton bag in Ginza, Japan, and a confused neuron in an aging human brain are all actually part of the same story.
It sounds like one of those conspiracy theory boards with all the red string connecting photos.
It does, but it's not. It's just the global economy as it stands right now. And the core theme that kind of emerges from this stack is disruption and decoupling.
Disruption and decoupling. So that's our mission today.
That is the mission. We need to synthesize this report. We have to connect these massive macro fears, like the idea that AI is literally eating the entire software industry with these tiny, almost hidden micro opportunities. We're going to talk about so-called zombie biotechs that might be holding the keys to some incredible breakthroughs. And we're going to talk about industrial shifts that I think 90% of the market is completely misreading.
And we have to start with the hook, because there was one concept in here that just stopped me cold. We talk about the AI revolution all the time. It's almost background noise now.
It is.
But this report argues that AI isn't just a tool anymore. It's not a helper. It's a platform that is actively killing off other software companies.
It's the great AI disintermediation. That's the term the report uses. And it's chilling if you work in tech. It really is.
And then on the complete flip side of that, you have this grim reality in the physical world. U.S. farm bankruptcies jumped 46% last year.
46%.
That's not a small number. That's a Depression-era number.
It is, and it signals a fundamental shift in the American heartland. So we have a lot to cover. Here's the roadmap for you listening. We're going to start with that big, scary monster, the death of SaaS, software as a service. Then we're going to look at what the report calls mutually assured disruption playing out between the U.S. and China.
After that, we're going to play the role of the second-order oracle. We're going to connect those whispers about tourism and pigs and bank rules to find the alpha, the investment edge. And then we'll hit the contrarian ideas, the gold in the trash section.
And you absolutely cannot skip the end, because that final section on frontier science, specifically on new approaches to cancer, MS, and ALS, is some of the most genuinely hopeful material I have read in a decade.
It really is the hope section. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the macro shift. Section 1. The report calls it the Great AI Disintermediation.
And this is a thesis that I think is going to make a lot of people in Silicon Valley, and really anyone who owns tech stocks, very uncomfortable. The thesis is blunt, short SaaS.
Okay, let's define terms for everyone because we hear these acronyms all day. SaaS, software as a service. This is the model we've all been living with for, 15 years now?
At least.
Salesforce, Slack, Dropbox, HubSpot. You pay a subscription, usually per user, per month, to access software in the cloud.
Exactly. And for a solid decade, that was the golden ticket. The playbook was so simple. Find a niche business workflow. Maybe it's signing contracts, maybe it's managing a dentist's calendar, maybe it's tracking expenses for a construction crew.
Right.
You build a nice, clean interface on top of a database, you charge, $15 or $20 a month per user, and you become $1 billion company. It was a license to print money.
It was the era of, there's an app for that. If you had a business problem, you bought another SaaS subscription to fix it. My company probably has 30 of them.
Right. But this report is waving a massive red flag. It says that the bloated SaaS sector is facing a truly existential threat. And the threat isn't a better app. It isn't a cheaper competitor from overseas. The threat is the universal interface.
The distinction they make here is fascinating. They say the narrative has shifted from AI as a feature to AI as the platform. Can you break that down? Because right now, every app I use has that little sparkle icon that launches some AI chatbot. Isn't that AI as a feature?
That is exactly AI as a feature. And that is a trap. That's the old guard trying to bolt on the new technology to stay relevant. But think about it from a user's perspective. From your perspective, why do you pay for 12 or 30 different subscriptions?
Well, because they don't talk to each other. I need the specific tool for the specific job. I can't book a flight in my spreadsheet software, and I can't run payroll in my designer software.
But what if you could? What if you had a general-purpose AI agent, let's say it's from Anthropic or OpenAI or Google, that acts as the single interface for everything? You don't tell your AI, open the travel app, log in, search for flights from this city to that city, and book a seat. You just say, get me to Chicago by Tuesday morning for under $400.
So the AI does the clicking. The AI navigates all the terrible menus and the pop-ups.
Precisely. The AI becomes the abstraction layer. It sits between you and all that underlying software. And if the AI is doing the work, then the user interface of that niche software app, the pretty buttons, the intuitive layout, the drag-and-drop features that they spent millions of dollars designing, it all becomes irrelevant.
Huh. If I never see the screen, I don't care how good the UI is.
Exactly. And if the interface is irrelevant, the moat, the thing that protects that business from competitors, it just evaporates. Why pay a premium for a specific contract management software if a generic AI can read, draft, and file contracts just as well using a basic database that costs next to nothing?
It reminds me of what happened to travel agents in the late 90s. Once the internet let us book directly, the interface of the travel agent, the person you had to call, became an unnecessary cost.
That's a perfect analogy.
Now, the software itself is the travel agent, and the AI is coming to replace the software.
It's the same pattern of disintermediation, just one level deeper. And the report actually points to a real-world canary in the coal mine for this, a specific deal that just fell apart. Apax Partners, a massive private equity firm, was supposed to take over a company called Pinewood Technologies.
I saw that headline. That was a big deal. Something like, what, 575 million pounds? Pinewood is a major player in automotive dealer software.
Huge money. And Apax just walked away. They abandoned the deal. But it's the reason they cited that matters. They didn't say interest rates are too high. They didn't say regulatory hurdles. They explicitly cited AI-fueled market volatility.
Wow. That's rare. To specifically blame AI volatility in a formal deal termination, usually they use some vague boilerplate language.
It was a massive signal. Private equity is generally considered the smart money, right? They buy predictable cash flows. If they're getting cold feet, it means they're looking at the 5-year-out cash flow projections for a company like Pinewood and saying, we can't trust this anymore.
They're realizing that the business of managing car dealerships might be done by a generic AI agent in a few years, and Pinewood software becomes worthless.
Or at least worth a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
They're realizing that these software companies might be walking dead because their core value proposition is being eroded by these new AI agents.
It's like buying a blockbuster franchise in 2008. You look at the revenue and say, hey, people are still renting movies, the chart goes up. But you're completely missing the Netflix truck that's about to run you over.
And the Netflix truck in this scenario is these autonomous agents. Speaking of which, the venture radar section of the report mentions something called OpenClaw.
OpenClaw. It sounds like a weapon from a James Bond movie, but it's an open source framework, right?
It is, and it's a really big deal because it democratizes the creation of these AI agents. It provides the tools to make it easy for any developer to build an agent that can interact with the web, browse sites, fill out forms, and perform tasks. It's the nuts and bolts.
And the report says the founder was just hired by OpenAI?
Peter Steinberg, yeah. Snatched up by OpenAI. Which implies they want to control the core infrastructure of these agents. They don't just want to be the brain. They want to be the hands and feet, too.
They want to own the platform that builds the platform killers.
Exactly. The report calls it a moonshot signal. If the tools to build these agents are becoming open and free, or controlled by the giants like Microsoft and Google who own the foundational models, then that whole middle layer, all those thousands of SaaS companies, they're in so much trouble.
So the takeaway here for anyone listening is pretty stark. If you are investing in or working for a software company, you need to ask a really hard question. Is this company just workflow on top of data?
Yes. Is it just a pretty screen for entering information and moving it from column A to column B? If so, it is completely exposed. The value is moving to the basement, the foundational models like GPT or Claude, and to the penthouse, the owners of unique proprietary data that the AI can't get anywhere else.
And everything in the middle just gets squeezed into nothing?
It gets disintermediated.
That is a terrifying thought for an entire generation of tech workers and investors. Okay, so that's the tech landscape. Let's pivot to the real economy, because for a while now, we've been hearing these dovish whispers from the Fed, soft landing, inflation is cooling. It felt like maybe we were out of the woods.
We all wanted to believe it.
But this report just throws a huge bucket of cold water on that idea.
It really does. The section is titled The Consumer and the Inflation Trap. And the core thesis is that inflation isn't gone. It's become structurally embedded. And the American consumer, well, the American consumer is cracking under the pressure.
We've all felt it at the grocery store, that sticker shock that never really went away. But the report points to some specific corporate signals. Levi Strauss and McCormick, jeans and spices.
Right. Levi's is hiking prices again. And McCormick, the spice company, is forecasting $50 million in incremental tariff costs this year alone.
$50 million just in tariffs. Now, do they eat that cost, or do they pass it on to me when I buy a little jar of cinnamon?
Come on. Companies never eat the cost if they can help it. They pass it on to you. The report makes it clear these aren't one-off adjustments. They are a feature of the new operating environment. We're seeing health insurance premiums at one small firm mentioned in the report jump 14%. Online prices in January had their largest monthly increase in a dozen years.
So that little break we thought we were getting on prices after the holidays.
It's over. It was a mirage. And you can see the breaking point most clearly in the auto industry. This stat it blew my mind. The average new vehicle price in the U.S. hit $50,000.
That is insane. $50,000. That's a down payment on a house in a lot of places, or it used to be. How can the average family possibly afford a $50,000 car?
They can't. That's the entire point. It's completely untenable. And the report notes that Detroit finally realized this. They spent years chasing these high-margin SUVs and trucks, phasing out cheaper cars like the Ford Focus or the Chevy Cruze because the profit margins were fatter on the big F-150s. But now, they are scrambling to figure out how to make affordable sedans again because they've priced out a huge chunk of the population. They flew too close to the sun.
This leads to that concept the report talks about, bifurcation. It's a fancy word for a split.
A really stark split. The economy is shaped like the letter K. The top arm of the K goes up. Those who can afford to pay more, the wealthy, they continue to spend. They buy the $50,000 car without blinking an eye. But the bottom arm of the K goes down. The middle to low-income consumer is completely locked out. They aren't just buying cheaper brands, they're stopping purchases entirely.
Which brings us to the investment angle from the report. It suggests shorting retailers that are exposed to that middle to low consumer.
Exactly. If you are a retailer selling discretionary good stuff people want but don't need to, people who are struggling to buy eggs and pay rent, you are in the danger zone. Their balance sheets are stretched thin. The report notes that credit card delinquency is rising fast. It's a trap.
Okay, let's zoom out even further. We've got tech disruption, we've got economic bifurcation. Now let's add the geopolitical layer. The report calls it mutually assured disruption.
It's a play on mutually assured destruction, the old Cold War nuclear doctrine. But this is purely economic. The U.S.-China tech Cold War has escalated far beyond what I think people realize. It used to be just about semiconductors, about chips. Now it's everything.
And the Pentagon is getting involved directly. The report highlights that they added Alibaba and BYD to the Chinese military companies list.
This is significant. It's the 1260H list. Now, for you listening, you need to understand, legally, this isn't a full sanction yet. You can still technically trade with them in many cases, but the report calls it a reputational toxic label.
It's like a corporate scarlet letter.
It is. It's designed to raise the cost of capital. It's a soft power move. If you are a U.S. entity, a bank, a pension fund, a university endowment, do you really want to be explaining to your board or your donors why you are invested in a company the Pentagon says is linked to the Chinese military? It creates a compliance nightmare, so the money just quietly leaves.
And this isn't just staying in the tech sectors, it's spilling over into our dinner plates. The report brings up Smithfield Foods.
This is a fascinating second-order effect. Smithfield is the largest pork producer in the U.S. They are as American as, well, as bacon.
Yeah.
But they're owned by the WH Group, which is Chinese.
And they are planning a massive $1.3 billion plant in South Dakota.
Right. But now, because of this mutually assured disruption environment, that Chinese ownership is attracting immense political scrutiny. The report explicitly says we should expect political pressure to mount against that deal. Food security is becoming a pillar of national security.
It makes you wonder if we're going to see forced divestitures in agriculture like we're starting to see in tech with platforms like TikTok.
I think it's almost inevitable. And speaking of tech and biology, we have to talk about the Biosecure Act.
Right.
This is a major theme in the report, and if you invest anywhere in the healthcare space, you need to understand this. The Pentagon placed a company called OSINT on that same military-linked list.
OSINT. Who are they?
They are a massive CRO, a contract research organization. Think of them as the factory for the pharmaceutical industry. If you are a big U.S. pharma company like Pfizer or Merck, you invent the molecule, but you often hire WSI to run the massive complex clinical trials, to synthesize the compounds, and to handle the data. They are deeply integrated into the global R&D supply chain.
So if you're a U.S. pharma company and you've been using WSI to run your trials for your next blockbuster drug.
You are panicking right now because the Biosecure Act is essentially forcing a reshoring of pharmaceutical R&D. You cannot have your critical drug data and intellectual property in the hands of a company the Pentagon doesn't trust. It's that simple.
And chaos creates opportunity. The report points directly to U.S.-based CROs like Charles River Labs.
Ticker CRL. The logic is crystal clear. If contracts are being pulled from China, they have to go somewhere. You can't just stop a phase 3 drug trial. It has to be moved. Charles River is the natural, trusted, U.S.-based beneficiary. It's a multi-billion-dollar shift in cash flow that the report argues the market hasn't fully priced in yet.
There is one more geopolitical whisper in here that I found really intriguing because it's so subtle. It's about tourism.
Yeah.
The report calls it weaponized tourism.
Yes, this is a very modern form of statecraft. The report notes a whisper, not an official statistic yet, but a whisper from boots on the ground, that Chinese tourism to Japan plummeted 45% in December.
45% in 1 month. That's not a fluctuation, that's a cliff. Did the plane stop flying? What happened?
No. The cause appears to be purely political. Prime Minister Takaichi made some remarks defending Taiwan.
Ah, the third rail of Asian politics.
Exactly. So the Chinese government didn't necessarily issue an official travel ban, but the whisper network and state media likely sent a strong signal. Japan is not friendly right now. Geopolitics is being used to direct consumer behavior on a massive scale.
And since Chinese tourists account for nearly a quarter of all spending in Japanese luxury retail.
It's an absolute disaster for those companies. The alpha here, the report suggests, is to short Japanese luxury retail and hospitality stocks. They're about to face an earnings shock that the algorithms haven't picked up on yet because the cause is political, not purely economic.
That is the definition of a second-order oracle, connecting a political speech in Tokyo to a drop in earnings for a department store in Ginza.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, which is all about connecting these seemingly distinct whispers.
Let's talk about the American heartland again. We mentioned farm bankruptcies rising 46%. That is just a tragic statistic. Behind every one of those numbers is a family losing their home, their legacy.
It is tragic, and the demographics are brutal. The average farmer is aging. The report says the kids simply don't want to take over. They don't want the crushing debt. They don't want the climate uncertainty. They don't want the isolation. So when the parents retire or go bankrupt, the family farm effectively ends.
But the investment pivot here is so counterintuitive. You'd think, farming is in trouble, I should sell my farm equipment stocks.
Yeah.
If nobody is farming, nobody is buying tractors.
That's the first level thinking.
But the report says, no, look at Deere & Co.
Because bankruptcy forces land consolidation. The land doesn't just disappear. It gets bought up by huge corporate agricultural operations. And corporate farms operate completely differently. They don't use old, handcrafted methods. They prioritize maximum efficiency, automation, yield per acre. They buy the big, high-tech, autonomous combines that run on GPS and collect terabytes of data.
So the death of the small family farm is actually a primary driver for high-tech ag machinery sales. That is grim, but it's financially logical.
That's the nature of this kind of analysis. You have to separate the emotion from the trend. The trend is consolidation, and consolidation favors high-tech equipment. Full stop.
Another trend in the whisper section is about banking regulation. The report calls it the bank regulation flip. This feels a bit technical, but bear with us because it involves a lot of money. It's about something called mortgage servicing rights, or MSRs.
Okay, let's unpack this. When you take out a mortgage, you might get it from a local broker. But you probably send your check every month to a different company, a servicer. That company processes the payment, handles the escrow for your taxes and insurance, and for doing all that work, they take a tiny fee. The right to collect that fee is an asset, an MSR.
Got it. It's a stream of tiny payments that adds up.
Exactly. For a long time after the 2008 crisis, regulations made it really expensive for big banks like Wells Fargo to hold these assets on their books. The government effectively said, this is risky, we don't want you holding too much of this. So, shadow banks, non-bank lenders like Rocket Mortgage or smaller specialized players, they stepped in and took almost all of that market share.
But now the wind is changing.
The report indicates the Fed is planning to ease capital requirements for banks holding mortgages. They want the big boys back in the game. It seems they realize that having all this mortgage risk concentrated in the shadow banking sector, which is much less regulated, might actually be more dangerous in the long run.
So they are inviting Wells Fargo and the other big banks back to the table?
They're rolling out the red carpet. This is a direct, massive tailwind for companies like Wells Fargo. They can now use their huge balance sheet to reclaim market share from the shadow banks. It's a regulatory gift. If you own Wells Fargo stock, you like this. If you own the shadow banks, you now have a new, massive competitor entering the ring.
One last whisper before we get to the specific stock picks. This one made me laugh, but then it made me worry. A KPMG partner in Australia was caught using AI to cheat on an exam about AI ethics.
You can't make it up. The irony is just, it's so rich. But it highlights a massive, massive compliance risk. This wasn't a junior intern trying to get ahead. This was a partner.
If a partner at a Big Four accounting firm, someone whose entire job is supposed to be about integrity and verification, is cheating with ChatGPT, imagine what's happening in universities or on the junior staff levels across every industry.
It means we are entering a crisis of competence. Nobody knows if anybody actually knows anything anymore. Did they write that report, or did the AI, did they understand that financial model, or did they just prompt it?
And a crisis of competence creates a market for verification.
Precisely. The report suggests buying education tech and remote proctoring companies. The trust but verify economy is going to boom. Professional firms, universities, licensing boards, they're all going to have to spend a fortune to prove their people aren't just good at prompting an AI, but that they actually understand the material. It's a whole new industry being born out of this.
Okay, let's get to the part everyone waits for. The high-conviction contrarian ideas. These are the specific tickers from the report, but caveat emptor, right? This is not financial advice. These are for the brave.
These are definitely special situations. This is where you're looking for gold in the trash can. You are making a specific bet that the market is structurally fundamentally wrong about a specific company for a specific reason.
Idea number one, the zombie biotech, Sangamo Therapeutics, ticker SGMO.
This is a classic deep value play. The market currently values Sangamo at near cash. That means if you take all the money they have in the bank and subtract their debt, that's basically their entire stock market valuation. The market is saying their actual business, their science, their patents, their pipeline is worth zero.
Zero? That seems harsh.
It's as low as it can go without being bankrupt. They're treating it like a walking corpse, a zombie. But the report argues this is completely wrong. They have a gene therapy for a condition called Fabry disease. The drug is ST920.
What is Fabry disease?
It's a rare, horrible genetic disorder where the body can't break down a specific type of fat. That fat builds up and damages the heart, the kidneys, the nervous system. Sangamo's drug is in the registration stage. That means the clinical trials are done, the data looks good, and they are preparing to ask the FDA for final approval. And the data shows it's safer than the competition's drugs.
So if the drug is good, why is the stock dead?
Because they are running out of money. It's a classic biotech race against the clock. They have what looks like a cure, but they might not have the cash to keep the lights on long enough to get it to market and sell it.
Oh.
But the contrarian view is that a single partnership deal, getting a big pharma company to come in and back that drug, would bring in non-dilutive funding that could exceed the company's entire current value.
So if they announce a deal with, say, Pfizer, the stock could double or triple overnight.
Potentially. It's a binary bet. Survival equals massive upside. Death equals zero. That's the risk profile.
Okay, idea number two, the dead diagnostic. Quidelortho, ticker QDLEO.
This one is interesting. The stock collapsed down 22% after their last earnings report. The market absolutely hates their failed Savannah product platform. It was supposed to be their next big growth driver, and it flopped. So everyone is selling.
Everyone, except the people who run the company.
Exactly. This is the countersignal you look for. The CEO, the CFO, and a key director all bought stock with their own money after the massive drop. They put in nearly $600,000 combined.
I always pay attention to that. They know more than we do. They're sitting in the meetings.
Insider selling can tell you nothing, People sell for all kinds of reasons. They need to buy a house, pay for a divorce, taxes, but insider buying, especially in a cluster like that, after bad news, there's only one reason to buy. They think the stock is going way up. They're signaling to the market, you overreacted. This was a gap year, not a terminal decline.
All right, idea number 3, Latin American oil. Geopark, ticker GPRK.
The market looks at this and sees a stagnant, small-cap oil company in a volatile region. Oh, it's South America, it's political risk, oil is a dying industry. So it's so boring and risky at the same time.
But the report says, look at the acquisitions.
They bought into the Vaca Muerta shale play in Argentina.
A dead cow.
Yes, but in the oil world, Vaca Muerta is legendary. It's one of the biggest and lowest-cost shale reserves in the entire world. They also bought assets in Colombia. The report's analysis claims that these new assets will triple their total oil production by 2028.
Triple.
Yes, but the market is pricing them based on the oil they pump today. It's not giving them any credit for the future oil that is now in their reserves. If you believe they can execute and get that oil out of the ground, you're essentially buying massive future growth for free at today's price.
And finally, idea number 4, the legal gamble. MBIA Inc., ticker MBI.
It's a bond insurer. And their stock has been a mess for years because they've been tied up in the long, complicated bankruptcy of Puerto Rico. It's been a massive overhang.
But there's a Supreme Court case that could change things.
Yes. Trump v. Slaughter. Sounds like a TV show drama. But if the Supreme Court rules favorably in this case, it could dissolve the federal oversight board that's been managing Puerto Rico's debt restructuring.
And that would be good for MBIA.
It would very likely speed up the final resolution and the payouts they are owed. It would remove the uncertainty that has crushed the stock. It would re-rate the stock massively. Again, the binary bet. You aren't investing in the day-to-day business fundamentals here. You are betting on a judge's ruling.
High risk, high reward. Now, I want to transition. We've talked about money and corruption and geopolitical tension and bankruptcy. Let's talk about something that feels good. The frontier science section.
This was my favorite part of the stack, hands down. It's titled Frontier Science and Biotech. But honestly, some of this reads like science fiction that just happens to be true now.
Let's start with cancer. We always talk about curing cancer, but this approach in the report is different. This is about tricking cancer into killing itself.
Right, so you have these really aggressive cancers, osteosarcomas, which is bone cancer, and glioblastomas, which is brain cancer. They are terrifying because they are essentially immortal cells.
How does a cell even become immortal?
Well, normally, every time one of your cells divides, the little protective tips on your DNA, they're called telomeres, they get a tiny bit shorter. You can think of them like the little plastic cap, the aglet, on the end of a shoelace. Eventually, it wears down completely, the shoelace frays, and the cell stops dividing. That's aging.
But cancer cells have a cheat code to get around that.
Exactly. Most cancer cells reactivate an enzyme called telomerase, which rebuilds those tips, keeping them eternally long. But about 15% of the nastiest cancers use a different, messier trick called ALT. It's like they are scavenging spare parts from other chromosomes to keep their shoelaces from fraying.
And the big discovery is about a protein called SMARCA1.
Think of SMARCA1 as the crutch that these specific ALT cancer cells have to lean on. Because their method of rebuilding their DNA is so messy and chaotic, they are under constant stress. They rely heavily on SMARCA1 to fix the constant errors and damage that happens during their replication.
So if you kick out the crutch,
the cancer cells stumble. Their DNA gets irreparably damaged. But, and here's the really cool part, they don't necessarily die immediately. They go senescent. They basically fall asleep. They stop dividing.
But sleeping cancer is a lot better than growing cancer.
True, but the report proposes a 1-2 punch strategy. First, you hit them with a SMARCA1 inhibitor drug to put them to sleep. Then you follow up with a second drug, a senolytic, which is specifically designed to seek out and kill only senescent cells.
It's a setup. You weaken them and make them vulnerable, then you come in with something else to finish them off.
Exactly. It's called a synthetic lethal strategy. And because your normal, healthy cells don't rely on SMARCA1 in the same way, you spare the healthy tissue. You aren't just poisoning the whole body with chemo. You're targeting the specific weakness of the cancer cell.
That is just incredible. Now, what about the aging brain? I think everyone listening worries about memory loss or something like MS, multiple sclerosis.
For decades, the dogma was that old brains can't repair myelin. Myelin is the fatty insulation that wraps around your nerves. When it degrades, the electrical signal slows down or stops. That's what causes MS. That's a big part of cognitive decline.
We thought the repair crew was dead or had retired.
We did. We thought the special cells responsible for making new myelin, they're called OPCs, just died off or stopped working as we aged. But this new research says, no, the repair crew isn't dead. They're just quiescent. They are sleeping on the job.
Easy cells.
A little bit, yeah. But they found that a specific localized signal, it's linked to a pathway called 12-CXCR4, can rekindle them. It wakes them up and tells them to get back to work making new myelin.
Rekindle. That's a beautiful word to find in a medical report.
It implies that the fire's still there. You just need to blow on the embers. This completely shifts the paradigm. We aren't just trying to slow damage anymore. We're talking about active regeneration, the potential to repair the brain of an 80-year-old as if they were 20.
That gives me chills. Okay, one more on the brain. ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease.
This one is so tragic, but the science is fascinating. There is a fundamental rule in biology. Neurons are not supposed to divide. Once you have a neuron, it's supposed to stay a neuron for your entire life.
It's done with the cell cycle. It's retired from that.
Right. But in ALS, for reasons we're just starting to understand, the neurons get confused. They get a signal that tells them to try and re-enter the cell cycle. They try to divide.
And that's bad.
It's catastrophic. A neuron is far too complex and specialized to divide. When it tries, it just destroys its own DNA and triggers a self-destruct sequence. It's a fatal biological mistake.
So the solution is to somehow stop them from trying.
Exactly. And weirdly enough, the answer might come from cancer drugs. There are drugs called CDK46 inhibitors that are used in breast cancer to stop cells from dividing. The theory is, if we give those drugs to ALS patients, we might be able to tell those confused neurons, "Stop, don't try to divide, just stay a neuron." And that could protect them from dying.
Repurposing cancer drugs to save neurons. That is just brilliant.
And the report actually wraps this whole section up with a theoretical killer experiment. It's a synthesis of all these ideas.
This is where the analyst, Manal Mehta, gets really creative.
She does. She proposes a hypothetical treatment for metastatic ovarian cancer. The idea is to create a drug that only activates in the very specific environment of the cancer, specifically in the presence of malignant ascites fluid.
That's the fluid that builds up in the abdomen with advanced ovarian cancer.
Right. And that fluid has a specific enzyme activity, TGM2, that isn't found elsewhere. So you build a smart bomb drug. It floats harmlessly through the body, totally inert. But when it hits that specific fluid in the abdomen, the enzyme acts like a key. It cleaves the lock of the drug, activates it, and boom.
And you would combine that smart bomb with the SMRL1 inhibitor we talked about earlier.
Yes. You create a drug that targets the specific microenvironment of the metastasis. It dramatically reduces toxicity for the patient because the drug is inactive everywhere else. But it increases the killing power right where the cancer is hiding.
It's targeted assassination on a cellular level. The synthesis engine, indeed.
It just goes to show that the answers are often sitting right there in the data in different scientific papers if you can just connect the dots between them.
Connecting the dots. That brings us to our final section, corporate leadership. Because all of this, the AI, the geopolitics, the science, it all requires competent leadership to navigate. But the global intelligence log in the report has a really worrying stat.
Companies are replacing their CEOs in record numbers. Last year, 1 in 9 CEOs at the largest firms were replaced.
1 in 9. That is a lot of turnover. That signals turmoil.
And the profile of who they're hiring is changing. The new CEOs are younger, the average age is down to 54, and 80% of them are first-timers. They've never been a public company CEO before.
So we have the most complex, volatile operating environment in modern history. AI eating software, trade wars with China, biological revolutions, and we are handing the keys to the kingdom to rookies.
That's the risk. Boards are getting incredibly impatient. They feel the old playbook, the pre-AI, pre-decoupling playbook, it just doesn't work anymore. So they're firing the institutional memory and hiring for agility.
But agility without experience can look a lot like panic, or just making huge mistakes.
Exactly. The report warns this creates unforced errors, like that Apax Pinewood deal failing. Inexperienced leaders might misread the geopolitical room or bet the entire farm on an AI strategy that hallucinates and gives them bad advice.
It's a very volatile mix.
It is, and it brings us completely full circle.
So let's recap this deep dive. We started with SaaS being eaten alive by AI agents. the great disintermediation.
We saw how the U.S.-China split is reshaping everything from pork supply chains in South Dakota to biotech research in Boston, forcing a massive reshoring of critical industries.
We found hidden value in zombie companies, provided you're willing to check for insider buying or look for misunderstood assets like future oil reserves.
And we ended with the incredible hope that science is on the verge of regenerating old brains and tricking cancer into destroying itself.
It's a world of massive, almost terrifying risk, but also of massive, incredible potential.
It is. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought that connects all of these threads.
Go for it.
We talked about Anthropic's Claude Cowork, which is targeting professional workflows. We talked about AI becoming the platform. And we just talked about CEOs getting younger and less experienced.
I think I see where you're going with this.
If the tools of management are becoming automated and the leaders themselves are becoming less specialized, are we heading toward a future where the C-suite is just a group of young prompters managing a team of AI agents?
A C-suite of prompt engineers.
Basically,
Yeah.
with no deep, hard-won industry knowledge required. You just type, "Hey, Claude, optimize the global supply chain for Q3. But what happens when the AI hallucinates a strategy? Or when it doesn't understand the nuance of a weaponized tourism whisper from Japan?"
Then you have a multi-billion-dollar company on autopilot flying straight into a mountain.
Exactly. The human element, the ability to connect the dots in a way that isn't just pattern matching, the kind of synthesis we try to do today, that might become the only premium skill left.
That is a thought to chew on. The listener has to be smarter than the algorithm.
Always.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It was a dense one, but hopefully you walked away with some new lenses to see the world.
Keep questioning the narrative.
And keep connecting the dots. We'll see you next time.